going to be drawing in that space. You can draw whatever. On here, something I visualized. You can draw yourself as like a rock or a sun or an ocean or whatever you are. You can also draw anything at all while I'm reading the book to you. So I'm going to be finishing off Fatty Legs. So it's drawing time. Later that day, after my father had sold his winter's catch of furs, my mother came to find me. I was giddy with excitement, knowing what was to come. I tossed the caribou hide ball I was playing with high into the air, leaving a cluster of children scrambling for it. I followed my mother to the Hudson's Bay Company. The Hudson's Bay Company is the oldest surviving company in North America, incorporated by a royal charter in 1670. Hunters and trappers traded their pelts for goods and supplies. The Hudson's Bay Company was a magical place. They sold everything a person could ever need, from furniture to ladies' dresses, from rifles to candy. My mother stopped me on the stairs before I could race to the small treasure-packed timber building. She took one of the long braids in her hand. You know the nuns are going to cut your hair. You might get lice. Are you sure you're okay? You still want to attend this school and your hair will be cut? Yes, I told her. Of course I don't mind if my hair is cut. And I tried to make my face very serious. They will make you work very hard, harder than you ever work when you're with your father. I am strong, I said, pushing my shoulders back. I can do it. They will not be kind to you. They are not your family, and they are not like us. I will have my cousin Agnes there. I'll be fine, you'll see. My mother sure seemed to know a lot about a place she had never been before. I figured she was just trying to scare me. Life would be more difficult without me here to help her out with the smaller children, and Mom was probably jealous of my opportunity to learn to read and go to this special school. Well then, we'd better go in, and you better find some new stockings to keep your legs warm underneath your uniform. So then it's referring to page 93, which is a photo of the Hudson's Bay Company. Beyond them, two immense wooden buildings, much larger than our schooner, with rows and rows of windows. I had forgotten how big these buildings were. This photo, taken from the water, shows the school on the left and the hospital on the right. In the school building, the boys' dormitory is on the left, while the girls' dormitory is on the right. The classrooms are on the bottom floor. So this is a picture of the school she went to, and this is a picture of the Hudson's Bay Company. So actually there were hospitals. I was wrong. I thought the hospitals were far away, but the hospitals were right beside the residential school. But unfortunately, there were not some cures, just like there's no cure yet for the coronavirus. There were not some cures for some illnesses. My mother's, okay, so then, well then, we better go in and find some new stockings to keep your legs warm underneath your uniform. My mother brought me some strange smelling soap, a comb to keep my hair neat, and a brush for my teeth, and something in a white tube. She had never brushed her teeth with toothpaste before.
What?
She had never used toothpaste before. So mother bought me something in a white tube. She also bought me thick, heavy pair of gray stockings. They were like the kind I had seen the outsiders wear, the kind that pull up above your knees. I wanted to put the stockings on right away, but my mother told me I had to wait until I was at school. She did not want them to be ruined and all dirty before school, because she said the outsiders loved cleanliness. As we left the store, I noticed a member of the RCMP relaxing on a chair near the entrance. The Mountie was reading from one of the many richly colored books that all crammed a column of shelves beside him. How distinguished he looked as he pulled a pipe with a book in his hand. Soon I too would be able to read, and I would be distinguished. So here she is with her mom, and she's warning her, your braid's going to be cut, and she's like, oh, I'm fine with that. My parents did not let me go to school right away. They wanted to keep me until after the athletic games, which were held on Dominion Day, the 1st of July, 3 whole weeks after our arrival. July was a festive time of year for the Inuit, including us Inuvialuit, and for the Dene Nation, made up of native peoples such as the Gwendshin. Freed at last from the ice, the men would bring their families to Aklavik, not only for supplies, but to compete against each other in a test of strength. I was disappointed I could not go to the school immediately, but I did not often get to see my cousins, and I enjoyed visiting with them. On the first day of the games, my father made a balloon for us by blowing up a sack from the throat of a ptarmigan. We chased each other down a long, seamlessly endless street, the sound of our feet clomping and thudding against the wooden boardwalk, batting the balloon in the air and stealing it from one another. I caught the balloon and ran. Soon I could no longer hear my sisters and cousins behind me. I had lost them. I stopped and I looked up, forgetting the balloon. In front of me, at least a dozen children dressed in uniforms were crouched in a silty garden. They were breaking the earth and pulling roots with small tools. These had to be the naughty children who were made to kneel for forgiveness. Beside them stood two immense wooden buildings, so much larger than our schooner, with rows and rows of windows. I had forgotten how big those buildings were. This was where I would go to school, but I would not be like those children. I would be so good, and I would never have to garden. I could spend all of my time inside learning to read. I batted the balloon from one hand to the other and turned and ran back to find my cousins and my sisters. The day after the athletic games began, a boat docked. We watched the passengers file up on the beach. There were children with solemn faces. Some of the children were crying. I searched the faces for Agnes, but she was not among them. See those children, my mother said. Those are your classmates. Why are they crying, I asked. Because they do not want to go to the outsider school. Don't they want to learn how to read and learn English? They would rather be with their families than learn how to read and learn English, my mother said, tightening her lips. Her words stung. Now that the other new children are here, it is time for us to take you to school, my father said, coming up behind us. Go and gather your things. My parents led me along the same street I had run down to lose my sisters and cousins the day before. The buildings came into view. The garden was deserted now. Are these both schools? No, only that one. My father pointed to the building on the right. The other is the hospital where you'll be trained when you are old enough. You will be asked to help out in the hospital at some times. Like a nurse? That sounds like so much fun. My father gave me a look that said he did not think it was fun. The top floor is where the students sleep. The building is divided into a boys' side and a girls' side, so you will not be allowed to talk with the boys, even if they are your cousins. I was getting a little worried about the school now, and it was beginning to look less inviting. I wondered how I would ever feel safe enough to sleep in such a large place. I was used to staring at the glowing coals of my father's pipe where I slept under his bed until I drifted off. It suddenly sank in. My family would not be staying with me. How would I ever fall asleep without the smoky red glow of my father's pipe? The church is in the middle of the dorm rooms, and the classrooms and the refectory are below them, he explained. What is a refectory? It's a place where people eat together. My mother was silent. She did not say a word until my father had his hand on the big double doors of the school. It's not too late to change your mind, Uliman. You can come home with us if you like. Change my mind? As if I would ever change my mind. I couldn't manage this. I would read myself to sleep like Rosie did. I wasn't going to let anything stop me. I couldn't wait to get inside, even if I couldn't fall asleep. My father placed a hand on my shoulder. You will not be able to return home for a very, very long time. The ice will be on the ocean, and the boats won't be able to come through. I know, I said, but I didn't really get it. My 8th birthday had only just passed. I did not really understand yet how long a year was. It had not crossed my mind that the same ice that allowed people to travel only for brief weeks of summer would be preventing me from ever going home. I did not know that an unusually short summer of 1945 would hold me prisoner for a second year with the sisters, the fathers, and the brothers. They were not my family. They were like owls and ravens. They were like owls and ravens raising wrens. My father pulled open the door, and I stepped past him. I was inside a school for the first time in my life. All around me was glass and wood. An enormous photograph hung from one of the clean painted walls. It was an outsider who wore a fancy sash. Medallions like large coins hung from his neck. So here it is. Page 94 is the outsider. This is the king. This was King George VI. Has anyone seen the movie The King's Speech?
No.
Okay, you'll
My dad
probably see it
has.
when
Watch
it's
The
older.
Crown.
It's my #1 movie. I love it so much. The King's Speech is such an awesome movie.
I've watched The
And
Crown.
oh, you have? Okay. And he is the king in the King's Speech. So if you guys ever watch the King's Speech, I guarantee you will love it. So she sees a huge photograph of King George VI. An enormous photograph hung on one of the clean painted walls. Inside it and outside it were a fancy sash. Medallions like large coins hung from his chest. I would later learn that he was the king of all the outsiders. So now here she is. There's a picture of her coming into the school with the nun.
The nun looks kind of creepy.
Yeah, the nun looks really sinister.
Can I see it? The nun?
Yeah.
What's the nun? What does the nun
So the nuns had to shave their heads to put habits on. A habit is like a long thing that they put on their head.
Yeah.
So the nuns told me that he was also my king. But I knew my family listened to no one but Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Walecki, who owned the North Star. They were our kings. The school's smells were unfriendly and harsh against the tender skin of my inner nostrils. I craned my head in every possible direction I could without moving my feet. It was like someone had enlarged the Hudson's Bay Company by many times and stripped it all clean. My eyes darted from wall to wall, trying to take it all in. Yes?
It said that your phone was getting too hot and that the
Okay.
video might crash.
We're almost done.
So,
An outsider with a hooked nose. So, does anyone know what a hooked nose is?
Yes.
It's like when their nose comes down a little bit. An outsider with a hooked nose, like a beak, came to me, scraping her footprints echoing down the long, otherwise silent halls. I'm glad you have come to your senses, she told my father in you Villa Lucatan. So the nun is speaking in her native language. You certainly cannot teach her all the things she needs to know about English and reading. She wrapped a dark cloak arm around my shoulder and ushered me away. I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to my family. I looked back and I saw my father wiping tears from my mother's face. I wanted to run to my mother and tell her it would be all right, but a priest approached them and they walked away with him. So that's her when she had to say goodbye to her family. So that's chapter 2, and now the next chapter is chapter 3. Okay, so let me